In many houses, we tend to take water for granted. Just have to turn on a knob and we get water, and we don't really think about where that water is going after we've used it. There's actually a lot that happens in the background that we don't see that allows us to bring that water in and get rid of that water. In this video, we're going to talk about water services.
Where do we actually need water in a house? Consumption, washing, toilet flushing, cleaning, laundry, gardening, to mention just a few. So where does that water actually come from? First of all, we need rain. Rain will fall in areas called catchment areas. A catchment area is a large geographic region, usually with very spongy soil that will collect and hold on to rainwater. In Victoria, the majority of our catchment areas are either state forests or national parks. The water flows through rivers and seeps through the soil into large reservoirs and is then directed to water treatment plants where the water is filtered, purified, and fluorinated. The water is then directed to smaller service reservoirs before being distributed through thousands of kilometers of pipes to businesses and households. Each property is connected to a meter which records how much water is being distributed and used. We have a main water line distributing water across the neighborhood. This water is called the mains water. Secondary pipes then connect the mains water line to individual properties via the water meter. Because the water is already pressurized, usually by gravity, the water is pushed into the house without the need of a pump. Pipes running through the walls, floors, and ceilings then carry the water to the different faucets and water fixtures like the wash basin, the shower, the toilet, the kitchen sink, the washing machine, etc. A hot water system is needed to produce hot water. And the first thing that you need to make hot water is cold water. So cold water is fed into the hot water system and the hot water is then distributed to the necessary fixtures. Something else that many of us don't realize is that households use a lot of water. There are big water wasters such as the dishwasher and the washing machine, and some estimates even claim that a dripping tap of water can waste up to 20,000 liters of water a year. So what can we actually do about this? Well, out of the water uses we have seen previously, only consumption really requires clean, purified water. Consumption includes drinking, cooking, and dishwashing. Any use that may result in the water being ingested. The rest can use alternative sources of water. So what are these alternative sources? The most obvious is rainwater. There is a huge potential for rainwater collection in Melbourne. This map shows rainfall distribution in Australia, and Victoria is not actually doing so badly. To collect rainwater, you first need a tank. There are several types of tanks, and the suitability of each will really depend on the situation. But regardless of what tank is used, the collection process is very similar. In theory, we have a roof, a gutter, and a downpipe, and the water just flows into the tank. The actual setup is a bit more complicated than that. A roof is not a clean surface and will often be covered with pollutants such as leaves, bird poo, dust, and all sorts of germs. If there are no proper mechanisms in place, the pollutants will end up in the tank and eventually in the house plumbing. The first mechanism is the gutter guard, which is a mesh which sits over the gutter and filters out large debris such as leaves. Small and soluble pollutants will pass through the mesh. This is where the first flush kicks in. The first flush is simply a tube that fills up as the rain falls. All the pollutants on the roof are washed from the roof and collect into the tube. A floater inside the tube will gradually rise with the water level, and when the tube fills up, the floater will block the entrance of a tube, locking the pollutants inside. The remaining water is then redirected into the rainwater tank. The pollutants inside the rainwater or in the air will not necessarily be redirected to the first flush, and some will inevitably make their way to the rainwater tank. Water is then pumped through a filter and into the house, and depending on what type of filter is used, more pollutants and some of the bacteria might be filtered out. What if we want to collect water from both sections of a roof? We can use what we call a wet or charge system. So we have a very similar setup on the other side of a roof, connected by a pipe of water going either under or around the house. The column of water on one side pushes the water up and into the tank. It's called a wet system because there's always going to be water remaining in the pipes, even with no rain. So how is rainwater distributed inside the house? Let's look at two scenarios. First one, the rainwater is used everywhere. First of all cold water pipes are disconnected from the mains. We start with a rainwater tank, a pump and a filter, and the rainwater pipes run through walls, floors and ceilings just like with the mains water. The rainwater tank is also fitted with an overflow to the legal point of discharge in case the rainwater tank fills up. In the eventuality of the opposite, if the rainwater tank runs out of water, the tank also needs a mains water backup. How does that backup work? Inside the tank, there is a weighted float connected to a cord. When the water level drops as the water is being used, the float drops as well. At a critical level, the weight of the float will pull down the cord, opening the valve and allowing the mains water to flow from the top. As the water level and float rise again, the valve is closed and the main water flow stops. In the second scenario, water is not used for consumption, so not in the kitchen. Instead, a dedicated mains water line runs directly to the kitchen sink, the dishwasher and the hot water system. It is important that the hot water system be connected to the mains water as well, as part of the hot water will go into the kitchen and the dishwasher. Be careful not to connect water fixtures to both rain and mains water. The mains backup happens at the rainwater tank, not at individual fixtures. The next type of recycled water is grey water. So what exactly is grey water? Depending on whom you ask, the definition of grey water varies. But in this video, grey water will be defined as the water recycled from laundry and showers. Where can you reuse that grey water? Only for toilet flushing and gardening. So we collect the water from the shower and the washing machine, and that grey water is then collected into a grey water system. Grey water systems vary widely in shape and size, from the simplest systems just filtering to the more complex ones involving biological and chemical treatment. The treated grey water is then distributed to the toilets and garden taps. Not all plants are grey water tolerant, so you will need to be selective as to where you use the grey water outdoors. It's not uncommon either to have a rainwater backup into the grey water tank. So what about the water from other fixtures? It's called black water, and it cannot be recycled, at least not on a residential scale. There is a main sewer line for the house, usually running under the toilets. The sewer line ends at the sewer pit on one side and the sewer vent on the other. The different water drains then connect to the main sewer line in the most direct path. The grey water systems also has an overflow into the sewer, as untreated grey water cannot be kept for more than 24 hours. Sewer moves using gravity, and sewer connections must be considered very carefully. Right angles are not usually a good idea because they can cause clogging. Avoiding right angles is better, and minimizing the number of corners the sewage needs to take is best. So I hope that by now you have a pretty decent appreciation for how complex the water services can be, and all the logistics that goes into bringing in the water and taking the water. I mean, just look at this, all these pipes going up and down, right? So admittedly that's a bit more complex because it's a commercial building, but you get the idea. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video, and thanks for watching.